Giftedness Drift. This is the tendency of a potential leader to respond to ministry or to any activity, really, that relates to their gift cluster, which we'd already discussed. And so this is probably something that almost doesn't need to be said, or as they say, goes without saying. But you also know what happens when you don't say it. So there's a reality here that some people would call, in the construction world anyways, like if you're a hammer, everything's a nail. And it's the same principle. It's the same concept that if you're good at X, you'll try to find a way to turn any job into something you get to do X in or X for. So in many ways, one of the things that's most important about this principle is to be aware of your own tendency to drift towards that which you're good at, that which you enjoy doing. And so you'll try to turn any job into something which you get to use your primary giftings on and for. Not everything's a nail. You don't need to hit everything. And so there's a sense in which at times, no matter your level, no matter your occupation, no matter your activity, whatever it is you're engaged in, there are some things you will need to do that require skill sets and giftings that you're not great at. And sometimes you just have to do it. And so there's a sense in which you can't delegate a haircut, which we've talked about before. You yourself have to sit down in that chair and get the hair cut. You can't save time by delegating it to somebody else. The same thing's true in some ways in your job, in your occupation, in your ministry, in your vocation, whatever it is that you're doing. There will be components and aspects that won't cause you joy. And yeah, that's why I remind people that if it's your job, that's why they pay you to be there. There's just going to be some things you have to do that fall outside of your giftedness cluster. Now, granted, you should, the vast majority of the time, be focused on your areas of strength, because that is the great that's the great resource that you bring to the table. You're able to be far more efficient, far more effective, and far more economical whenever you're acting in your areas of strength. But just because your area of strength is, say, preaching, doesn't mean that every once in a while you don't have to run in with some rubber gloves and a toilet plunger because the toilet's overflowing right now and there's nobody else here to take care of it. And you can't just say, well, it's not in my job description, right? So the giftedness drift is primarily something to be aware of for yourself, to remember that sometimes, so long as it's not much more than 10 to 20% of the time, for sure, you have to act outside of your areas of gifting. If it's more than that, there needs to be some changing of the job description. Maybe you need to move on to a different job. Maybe you need to be able to delegate some of those things or hire somebody else on or bring other volunteers on, because you shouldn't be functioning outside of your giftings much more than 10 to 20% of the time in your occupation. The other aspect, though, is to be aware of this with those that are underneath you in a hierarchical structure. That there's just going to come times when they're going to have to just put their big boy pants on and do the job. It's not going to be something that they're going to really thrive in and enjoy. But as the supervisor, as the person over them, you also need to be aware that you're not overloading that component. They need to constantly be willing to cheerfully do that which they don't enjoy doing, but you also need to make sure that you don't have somebody in a position that's going to make them act outside of their gift cluster on a regular, frequent basis, because you will lose them or you'll keep them, and that might be worse, because that position is something that they're having to work hard to not be great, and that's not what you want in a combination for somebody that's working underneath you or for you. And so if they don't fit that job well, change the job or change the person. So 10 to 20% is about the maximum for outside of your giftedness cluster. But so long as it's within that range, just put your big boy pants on. Do the job you're getting paid to do. Giftedness drift. It happens to us all.